35,000 feet above the Sea of Japan.
Korean Air 007, unreadable.
We're experiencing rapid decompression, descent to 10,000.
The pilots have lost control of their plane.
Speed brake is coming out.
A 747 with 269 people on board plunges towards the sea.
Within hours, the story began circulating in Washington that the Soviets have been involved.
This shocking incident escalates tension between two bitter rivals. The investigation is mired in secrecy and deception. It's up to investigators to find the answer before the crash of a passenger jet leads to an all-out war.
Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband.
It's just after 2 in the morning aboard KAL Flight 007.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
After a brief layover in Anchorage, a Korean Airlines 747 is on its way to Seoul. The marathon flight originated in New York 13 hours ago. Captain Chun Byung-in has nearly 11 years' experience flying for Korean Airlines. Before that, he served 10 years in the Korean Air Force. This leg of the flight is a 6,100-kilometer journey over the North Pacific. Once the plane is in the air, there is very little for the pilots to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll soon be serving breakfast before we land in Kimpo, which will be in about 3 hours.
Many of the passengers plan to take connecting flights to other destinations after landing in Seoul. Mary Jane Hendry is heading to Japan to start a new life.
My sister Mary Jane found a job and she'd gotten hired by this Cara company. She was exactly the kind of person that they needed for their company in Tokyo. So she was leaving to embark on this new stage of her career.
Just 15 minutes behind them is the plane's sister flight, KAL 015.
Korean Air 007.
Go ahead, Korean Air 015.
What are you doing?
The flight crews chat to help pass the time.
Go see the leaves.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 040.
In an effort to conserve fuel, the crew decides to take the plane to a higher altitude.
Tokyo Center, Korean Air 007.
Korean Air 007, Tokyo.
Korean Air 007 requests climb 350.
Roger, stand by. Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Roger, Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Then, without warning, the plane is out of control.
What happened? Charge throttles.
Landing gear.
Landing gear.
The crew extends the landing gear in an effort to stop the plane from climbing.
Altitude is going up. Altitude is going up. Altitude is going up. Speed brake is coming out. I can't descend.
This isn't working. This isn't working. Engines are normal, sir.
Is it rapid decompression?
Tokyo Center, Korean Air 007.
Korean Air 007, Tokyo.
We are experiencing rapid decompression. Descend to 10,000.
Korean Air 007, unreadable, unreadable. Radio check on 10048.
Stand by. Stand by. Stand by.
Headband. Emergency descent.
Korean Air 007, Tokyo.
Korean Airlines Flight 007 and all 269 people on board have vanished.
Korean Air 015, would you attempt to contact Korean Air 007, please, and relay position?
All efforts to contact the flight have failed. Tokyo makes calls to other radar stations in Japan and Korea.
I cannot contact Korean Air 007.
A call is even made to a radar facility in the Soviet Union. Relatives nervously await news of the missing flight.
The company that Mary Jane was going to work for, they apparently had phoned and said Mary Jane's plane hadn't arrived and that something had perhaps gone wrong with the plane. But at that point, we didn't really know anything.
There was concern that it had been either forced to land or crashed, or within hours, the story began circulating in Washington that the Soviets had been involved.
As the world waits for news about the incident, US military officials make a horrible discovery. At a top-secret surveillance facility, they've been monitoring Soviet transmissions. It appears the unthinkable has happened. At the time of the flight's disappearance, US soldiers heard what they thought was a routine Soviet training mission.
При нарушении государственной границы приблизиться к цели и уничтожить.
It doesn't seem possible that the Soviets would actually shoot down a passenger plane. But American officials have little doubt. The next morning, US Secretary of State George Shultz delivers an unusually blunt statement.
The United States reacts with revulsion to this attack. Loss of life appears to be heavy. We can see no excuse whatsoever for this appalling act.
It couldn't be. It couldn't be. How could they all just perish? What do you mean? There must have been a reason.
1983 is the height of the Cold War. Russia and much of Eastern Europe are united by communist ideology. Ruled with an iron fist, the Soviet Union is locked in a bitter political struggle with the West.
Relations were bad, but no one really knew how bad, how dangerously bad they were.
Initially, Soviet officials deny responsibility for the KAL disaster.
The story came out of Moscow was that the plane appeared, we intercepted it, tried to make it stop, it didn't, it flew away. That was the first story.
But soon they reverse course and come clean. A Soviet fighter jet did in fact shoot the plane down, but they insist the attack was justified.
The Soviet view was that it was on a spy mission, perhaps carrying instruments, cameras, recorders, and so forth.
The Soviet Union claims Flight 007 entered highly restricted airspace under orders from the US government. But the US insists KAL 007 was a routine passenger flight. The dispute only heightens political tension.
In terms of an actual shooting war, the closest points that we may have come were in that year, both before and after, when both sides, particularly the Soviet side, though, was expecting an attack.
The KAL disaster would put NATO nuclear disarmament talks in jeopardy. The Soviets would ultimately walk away. The nuclear threat is growing. Under such circumstances, the need for an impartial inquiry is urgent. The UN calls on the International Civil Aviation Organization.
ICAO offers a neutral investigation, an investigation team that can deal with all parties involved in a neutral way.
Kai Frostel joins the international team of investigators that will try to uncover the truth behind the destruction of Flight 007. With two superpowers squaring off, they're under pressure to find answers and find them fast. KAL 007's flight plan should have kept it well away from Soviet airspace. Either it was shot down over international waters, or the flight had strayed off course. Figuring out which is the first priority for investigators. But they face a huge obstacle. The plane's black boxes are still missing.
The lack of flight recorders, data recorder, cockpit voice recorder, that's significant in an investigation.
The Americans joined forces with South Korea and Japan in the search for the crucial devices. But the three allied nations are not the only ones searching.
On September 1st, we got an order to go to the place where the Boeing fell and take part in the search for the Boeing 747.
It's a race to find the black boxes. The Americans know they may never get the truth if the Soviets find the boxes first. Each side accuses the other of dirty tricks.
The U.S. did formally complain that the Soviets would either sail across U.S. ships, that they would drop false pingers to deflect listening devices away from the true pinger.
The Soviets claim Flight 007 was flying in Soviet airspace over Sakhalin Island when they shot it down. If that's true, the aircraft was well outside its designated aerial corridor, a route known as R20.
Across the North Pacific, there are various routes that are labeled that R20 was the one closest to Soviet airspace. The Red Route 1 was a nickname for it. It was the one closest. So it was known to be, or should have been known to be, a route that you took extra precautions on.
Investigators get their first hint that if the crew was flying in restricted airspace, they didn't know it.
The coordinates they were reporting, it put them on course.
The Tokyo air traffic controller who last communicated with Flight 007 tells investigators that all seemed normal.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
The crew reported they were flying the R20 route. But as with every other flight over the Pacific, 007 was beyond Tokyo's radar range. The controller could only rely on the pilots to verify their position. Perhaps they were mistaken about where they were. That possibility becomes more likely when investigators talk to the crew of the Korean Airlines flight that was just minutes behind Flight 007.
Tell me about the exchange with Flight 007.
The captain of the second flight recounts an odd conversation with the 007 crew.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 040.
We still have a 15-knot headwind.
Could he be getting a headwind if he was here?
It would be almost impossible for one flight to have a tailwind and the other a headwind. Something doesn't add up. But with the black box still missing, investigators have no way of knowing where KAL 007 actually was at the time of that exchange.
That made it very difficult in the way that we had no direct information that I would normally have as an accident investigator.
Frostel gets more information from an unlikely source, the US military. In a rare move, US officials share highly classified surveillance data from the night of the shootdown. A top-secret technology called passive radar can track the movements of every military and civilian plane around the globe. What it reveals about KAL 007 is stunning. The plane was way off course. For almost its entire journey across the Pacific, the flight had been drifting north. By the time it was shot down, Flight 007 was 560 kilometers, or 350 miles north of where it should have been, and had already flown in and out of Soviet territory. The Soviets were telling the truth.
And then it becomes a question of determining why was it off course that much.
To find the answer, investigators turned their attention to the navigation system on board the 747. It's called INS, the Inertial Navigation System.
The INS that was used on this airliner, like most in that time period, had an accuracy of about half a mile of drift per hour. Very accurate. It would get you where you wanted to be.
The system relies on coordinates, or waypoints, entered into the flight controller.
The way it works is that there is 9 waypoints that you put in. That's the way you program it.
59 degrees, 18.0 north.
Waypoints are essentially GPS coordinates that also have one-word names, like Bethel, Neva, or Nippy. Flight 007's INS should have been programmed to find and follow those electronic guideposts to Seoul.
18.0 north.
At 8:49, turn left heading 270.
Perhaps there was some last-minute change in the flight plan. Kai Frostel listens to the pre-flight conversation between the crew and the tower in Alaska.
Net at 473, turn right.
Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 310.
Net at 473, turn right heading 07.
It was total routine from the beginning to the end. There was nothing exceptional with the takeoff or the taxiing to position, the preparation for the flight.
After leaving Anchorage, the 747 flew out over the Pacific just as planned. But it never made it to the first waypoint. Instead, it drifted off course for more than 5 hours. Hope of uncovering the reasons why begins to fade. A 10-week effort to recover the flight recorders has turned up nothing. The search is called off.
The actual aircraft, where it was and how many pieces it was, remained unknown.
With the investigation stalled, Frostel turns to the plane's manufacturers.
The US and Boeing offered to simulate the route that we knew Korean 007 had flown. We went over to Boeing in Seattle and then Boeing carried out the simulation.
Waypoint number 2. 59 degrees, 18.
Retracing Flight 007's steps in a simulator leaves them with a few possibilities. One is that a mistake was made while entering the coordinates into the INS.
60 degrees, 47.1 north.
Normally the co-pilot would insert the waypoints and the captain would check that the correct digits have been put in.
60 degrees, 47.1 north, check.
Misprogramming the INS at the gate could have taken the plane over the Soviet Union.
Okay, let's try the flight in heading mode now.
A second, less likely possibility is that after programming the waypoint navigation system, the crew may have failed to turn it on.
After takeoff from Anchorage, the aircraft would have used a constant magnetic heading to get to the route.
It's a standard procedure to begin a flight using a magnetic compass heading for direction. Soon after takeoff, pilots must activate the navigation system so it can lock on to the first waypoint.
And if it was forgotten in that constant magnetic heading, it would continue over Soviet airspace.
The magnetic heading would have kept the plane flying in the right direction, but along a very different route than the one planned. Captain Chun was a distinguished pilot with years of experience. Forgetting to switch the autopilot to INS mode would have been an astonishing error. At this point, Frostel can only speculate why Flight 007 was off course. But what's even harder to understand is why the Soviet Union would risk starting a war by shooting a plane down.
The Soviets resorted to deadly force to punish this intruder. It's like shooting the paper boy in your front yard at night because you think he might be breaking into your house.
What could prompt such a response from the Soviets? Investigators get their answer from the US military. Though Flight 007 may not have been on a spy mission that night, another plane was, a US Air Force RC-135.
They were tracking an RC-135, which was doing very, very slow figure eights off the coast with its own listening devices, waiting for a Soviet missile test.
The spy plane was near the Soviet border in the path of the KAL jetliner. When their paths crossed, the two planes may have been indistinguishable on Soviet radar.
When 007 came in over Soviet airspace, the Soviet Union assumed it's an RC-135.
Along came this intruder, and they just fell into the patterns that they had prepared in advance for such an intruder.
On violation of state border.
Approach target and destroy.
But disturbing questions remain. Did the fighter pilot get close enough to see the target with his own eyes? Did he know it was a passenger jet? Requests to speak to fighter pilot Gennady Osipovich are refused. And for the time being at least, those questions are left unanswered. In December 1983, less than 4 months after the disaster, ICAO releases the findings of the investigation. Though lacking hard evidence, the report concludes Flight 007 strayed into Soviet airspace by accident, due to pilot error in operating the navigation system.
I would almost call it the best guess based on all the work and the factual information we had in 1983.
For them to summarize that the plane was there by accident, as far as I'm concerned, that's not the answers we wanted to hear, and we believe that there was further investigation to do.
The key to this mystery remains locked inside the plane's black boxes, which are assumed lost forever beneath the sea. In the months following the KAL disaster, unidentifiable human remains wash ashore in northern Japan. Small pieces of wreckage are also found. Investigators have no doubt that the plane was completely destroyed.
We don't know where their bodies lie. There was clothing that washed up on the shore, her ID washed up on the shore of Japan. Of course, getting that ID back was, at least we had something.
Like the victims' families, investigators have no clear idea where Flight 007 went down. But there are some people who do. Top Soviet officials are hiding the fact that 1 month after the incident, not only did they find the wreckage, they also found the all-important black boxes.
It was a big pile of debris. They took down this pile with their bare hands until they found the black boxes. There were 2 of them.
But the Soviets keep the boxes to themselves. The information is kept locked away. Until nearly 10 years later. After the turn of the decade brings a jubilant end to the Cold War, Glasnost ushers in a new spirit of openness in Russia. Eager to break with the past, the new administration in Moscow decides to go public.
The actual unveiling of the data recorders and black boxes was a total surprise. And suddenly this new material promised some real answers.
So I knew they're gonna tell me something. I wanted to have the facts from the tapes and then see how does those facts compare to what we wrote in 1983.
In 1992, during official ceremonies in Seoul, Russian leader Boris Yeltsin hands over the long-awaited flight recorders.
I was approached by KGB general, and he told me that you probably don't know me, but I have had the recorders for 10 years. I had them in the safe in my office. I knew it was a big international secret. It bothered me tremendously. Every day when I came to the office and I looked at my safe, and I knew the recorders were there. He told me, you may not understand that this is the happiest day in my life.
Kai Frostel is asked to lead the new team of investigators based in Paris. And as a clear indication that the times have changed, Vladimir Kaufman, a Russian avionics expert, joins the team.
Он, так сказать, ничем особо не выделялся.
At the time, I was working at the Civil Institute of Aviation and was an air crash investigator. This was an international investigation of a very high level.
Очень высокого уровня.
Their first task is to make sure the black boxes are authentic.
There was a high suspicion in a lot of quarters that the Russians or the Soviets had tampered with the tapes or had made bogus tapes. And so we had to 110% validate the authenticity of the tape. They had seals on them. I remember wax seals on them. The photographs were taken, the seals were cut.
Investigators confirm that the CVR handed over by the Russians is the same box that was installed on Flight 007.
They opened them and looked at them and validated the serial numbers, validated the model numbers.
Now that they know they have the right boxes, investigators need to make sure they have not been tampered with. Suspicion soon arises.
During the cleaning process, they noted that there had been some breaks in the tape and had been spliced by the Russians.
It is not uncommon for a tape to break during the impact of a crash. But distrust of the former Soviet Union runs deep.
First, they examined these areas of the splices where it had broken, and they did that on this high magnification photograph. One of the techniques that the French had that I hadn't seen before, that wasn't used in the United States, was a photo analysis machine. They could do this with this optical high magnification. They could actually see the magnetic waves.
The test confirms that no data was added or removed from the cockpit voice recorder when it was spliced together.
565, what was the altimeter again?
Finally, investigators can listen to the tape, confident that every word is authentic.
What? It's already time for breakfast.
What do you know?
Let's eat later.
But all they hear is idle banter from the crew.
I heard there's a currency exchange at the airport.
What kind of money?
Dollars to Korean money.
It's in the domestic building.
There is not a word on the tape to suggest the crew was on a spy mission.
Just a totally routine conversation, and either these guys are the most cold-blooded actors and falsifiers ever, or they really were totally clueless about where they were. Sadly, I think the latter's the case.
It seems unlikely that KAL-007 was on a spy mission, but it was caught flying over Soviet territory. Investigators have long suspected that the crew either misprogrammed their navigation system or left it in the wrong mode, set on constant magnetic heading. The flight data recorder finally provides the definitive answer.
The data revealed that the aircraft was on constant magnetic heading from soon after takeoff from Anchorage to the end. There was no deviation whatsoever in the magnetic heading.
The crew of KAL-007 never activated the waypoint navigation system.
Gear up.
Landing gear up. Now passing 500.
It seems they simply forgot a basic step in their standard flight procedure.
The INS was functioning properly, had been loaded properly, and was counting along the route where it was thought it was supposed to be. But the autopilot was not following the INS commands. Instead, it was following a compass mode.
So it's only telling them where they're supposed to be.
Investigators learned that even though the plane was following a compass heading and not the waypoints, the computer would have continued to display their intended waypoints even though the plane was nowhere near them.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
This may explain why the crew never noticed their mistake. The crew also didn't notice a key indication that they were badly off course.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 040.
The fact that they were experiencing completely different weather patterns to a plane supposedly minutes behind them should have alerted them to the problem.
Now, there's a point where you see him teetering on the brink of realizing something is horribly wrong. He's talking to the pilot behind him, and the winds are almost 180 degrees apart, and there's a pause, and Chun is somewhere in his mind, as he's a pilot, and he has the instinct, you know, this is odd. Is it a clue to something I should look into? And he doesn't. And at that point, he might as well pull the gun out and put it to his head.
It was human error. A complacent crew in the middle of the night had their flight computer on the wrong setting, and then didn't notice they were straying off course.
Everybody makes mistakes sooner or later. Good pilots make mistakes. Not so good pilot makes mistakes. We're all making mistakes.
When investigators combined the conversation data from Flight 007 with intercepted Soviet transmissions, they get a detailed picture of what went wrong on September the 1st, 1983. The pilots believed they were on course. But 3 hours into the flight, their magnetic heading took them into Soviet airspace over Kamchatka. The Soviet military had been tracking a US reconnaissance plane.
There was a real American spy plane. It was there. There were two planes that looked alike. When KAL penetrated the border, the perception was that this was the plane.
As the passengers sleep through their long journey, the Soviets scramble fighters to intercept the plane.
The identity of the plane was just not known. The clues that it was a lost civilian airliner, well, might have been there. The clues that it was 135 didn't add up, but the Soviets involved didn't have time to think it through.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
But the fighters are not fast enough. The plane leaves Soviet airspace and continues along its heading to Seoul.
They figured that they'd just been spooked, but that was all over. Unfortunately, for everyone involved, it wasn't.
The airliner is just seconds from flying over the island of Sakhalin.
So Sakhalin was prepared.
KAL Flight 007 enters Soviet airspace for the second time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll soon be serving breakfast before we land in Kimpo, which will be in about 3 hours.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
Target is on your heading.
I can see it both visually and on the screen.
Major Gennady Osipovich, the lead fighter, makes visual contact with Flight 007.
Give warning burst with cannon.
But the warning shots go unnoticed.
Take up position for attack. Approach target and destroy.
Roger, locked on already. Executed launch. Target is destroyed.
The fighter pilot believed the 747 was an enemy spy plane. It takes nearly a decade after he shot down KAL 007 for that pilot to tell his side of the story. Investigators have long wondered what Major Gennady Osipovich saw and did after he was ordered to intercept an intruding aircraft in 1983. after nearly 10 years and the collapse of the communist regime, he finally tells his side of the story.
I saw the plane. It did look like a civilian plane because there was a flashing light on its tail and one on the top. But you can disguise any plane like this. You can put a flashing light on and you've got a civilian plane. So I did not have any thoughts about this.
Give warning burst with cannon.
When warning shots are fired, they usually include tracers, which are like flares and are easily seen. However, Osipovich had no tracers loaded in his cannon.
They're supposed to load tracers, just no one had shipped them any for the last 6 months, so they weren't there.
But even without the tracers, Osipovich thinks the 747 crew should have seen him.
As I caught up with him, I was flying like this, and he was flying like that. How could he not turn around and see me? I was flying with lights, everything was according to protocol. He should have seen me.
And then a horrible coincidence seals the fate of 269 people aboard the flight.
Korean Air 007 requests climb 350.
Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Like a car going uphill, a climbing plane slows down. But to the fighter pilot following the 747, this is interpreted as an evasive maneuver.
He decreased his speed so that I could either pass him or fall, one of the two. So that's how I knew that he's an enemy intruder.
That convinced him that it was not a civilian plane and that he was in danger.
My only thought was to catch and stop. This is what we were trained to do. I fell a little behind him and banked down, made a snake maneuver, put some distance between us, because otherwise the rockets would not have locked on.
He's running out of time because the airliner was approaching international waters.
Take up position for attack.
Roger, locked on already. Executed lock.
Osipovich fires 2 air-to-air missiles. They travel 2,000 kilometers an hour towards the jetliner. One of them explodes near the tail, damaging vital controls and hydraulic lines. The warhead also tears a hole in the fuselage, causing a rapid decompression in the cabin.
I saw the first explosion right under the tail, and that's it. The lights of the trespasser went out, and I went home.
Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband.
In the time that they lost pressurization to a certain point indicated that the hole would have been approximately 1.75 square feet.
The crew managed to fly the crippled plane for several minutes.
Immediately after the missile impact, the aircraft climbed to flight level 380, and then it descended about 5,000 feet per minute.
The stricken jetliner plummeted towards the Sea of Japan, with most of its passengers likely still conscious.
And that's when the recording stops. Our determination was that the airframe probably broke up at that point.
To this day, Gennady Osipovich is convinced he shot down a spy plane.
I knew they wouldn't order me to intercept if it was a civilian plane or cargo plane. Only if it was a trespasser.
We weren't blaming him, but some families did. They certainly did. They said it was his fault and he pressed the button and he shot them down, and they were looking to blame somebody.
It was clear that he was living with what he had done, and what he had done in order for him to live and to sleep was to believe that it was a spy plane, there were no passengers on board, that he had not killed 269 people. And that's the way he wants to believe it, and I'm not going to blame him for wanting to believe that.
In 1993, Kai Frostel has the evidence that he sorely lacked when he issued his first report. He can prove how the Korean pilots blundered and ended up off course, and how the Soviet pilot interpreted the situation. The destruction of Flight 007 is ruled an accident. Frostel recommends that all passenger planes be equipped with a clear indicator that the autopilot is in heading mode.
The tragedy of 007 is that it didn't have to happen. It was not inevitable. It was a series of accidents, a series of misunderstandings, a series of bad decisions that had been primed ahead of time.
When my sister Mary Jane said goodbye to me at the airport, she hugged me so tightly. And I said, Mary Jane, I feel like I'm never gonna see you again.
Korean 007 has had a great effect on my life. It has been close to my heart. That has been very sad for me. My sympathy and condolences all these years have gone out to the families.
New York City's LaGuardia Airport, March the 22nd, 1992. A commuter plane with 51 people on board tries to lift off the runway.
Rotate.
But the pilots can't get it to climb.
They knew they were in trouble, but they were fighting all the way to the end.
US Air Flight 405 plunges into the icy waters of Flushing Bay. 27 people die. For US investigators, it's an open and shut case.
This accident was not a huge surprise to us.
But Canadian investigators are stunned. They know the New York accident should never have happened.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
3 years earlier, an exhaustive investigation into a crash at a remote northern airport had identified a killer and spelled out ways to keep it from striking again.
Certainly, if they had followed the recommendations in my report, the F-28 crash at LaGuardia could have been averted.
The LaGuardia accident makes one thing clear. The right people never got the warning. March the 10th, 1989. It's 11:39 a.m. at Dryden, Ontario's airport. Light snow falls as Air Ontario Flight 1363 stops in the remote northern community on its way from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. The passengers stay on board while the plane is refueled. For flight attendant Sonia Hartwick and the crew aboard the Fokker F-28, it's been a frustrating day of delays.
Big, fluffy, white snowflakes at this time were falling gently to the ground, and it was very, very gray. And I thought, I guess this means we're going to be delayed again.
I can't see us making it to Winnipeg on time.
It's Friday, the beginning of March break. Already an hour behind schedule, another delay could jeopardize the vacation plans of many of the 69 passengers and crew.
There was a lot of families traveling on board with plans. Most of them were going skiing, and so they were very concerned about meeting their connections in Winnipeg.
Kenora Dryden, it's Ontario 363.
Ontario 363, Kenora. We've got quite a...
As First Officer Keith Mills checks on weather conditions, Captain George Morwood returns from making a phone call inside the airport.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
And it won't clear till late afternoon.
Check that. Quite heavy snow.
Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Temperatures hover around freezing. Visibility is decreasing. If the flight doesn't leave soon, it could be grounded indefinitely.
Dryden is a very small city. It's a very remote part of Ontario.
With a population of about 6,500, the isolated community lies halfway between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg. Harsh Canadian winters with bitter cold reaching -35 degrees Celsius are the norm here. It's not the place to be stranded in the middle of a snowstorm. Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer Don Crawshaw and his partner are escorting a prisoner to Winnipeg.
When we did a criminal check on the prisoner before we left, he came up as a violent person. So 2 of us had to go with him. He was wanted in Banff on a fraud charge, and that's what he was being brought back to Alberta for.
Hey, no smoking and seatbelts.
On.
Instruments.
Synced. Cross-check.
Captain Morwood uses the power of engine number 2, already running, to fire engine number 1. Morwood and Mills are both highly experienced pilots. However, they've each flown fewer than 100 hours in the Fokker F-28. The multi-million-dollar aircraft is the first Air Ontario jet to serve the remote Northern Ontario region. 24 minutes after landing in Dryden, Flight 1363 is ready to leave.
Inform Kenora, we're rolling.
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
An approaching aircraft's urgent request to land
Unbelievable.
gives Captain Morwood little choice. He delays takeoff.
Okay, 363 is holding short of the active.
We are going to be a few moments until a small plane lands safely. We're sorry, folks. This just isn't our day.
In the 2 years that I had flown with Air Ontario, I'd never come across anything like this before.
The Cessna 150 lands safely, clearing the runway for Flight 1363's departure.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 363 Dryden.
Finally, an hour behind schedule, the plane taxis to runway 29.
As we're going down the runway to position for takeoff, a blanket of snow was falling and I couldn't see the tree line anymore. It was like looking through a sheer.
Folks, we're sorry for the delay. Flight attendants, please be seated for takeoff.
At 12:09 p.m., Flight 1363 is ready for takeoff.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario, 363 is about to roll 29 at Dryden.
Ontario 363, Kenora, roger.
Captain Morwood performs a brief engine run-up, heating the engines to rid them of any accumulated snow and ice. Then he begins his roll down the runway.
When we're taking off, I'm usually very quiet and focused, meticulously going through a checklist in my own mind. What would I do in the case of an emergency?
B1.
The F-28 reaches its takeoff speed.
Rotate.
80 knots.
Our takeoff was very slow and sluggish, like a slow, sluggish person running up a hill.
Clearly, there's something wrong. The F-28 struggles to get airborne.
We cleared the trees. The plane started shaking.
I thought, oh my God, we're gonna crash.
That's when all hell broke loose. If you can equate to being in a Mixmaster, that's what the plane felt like at the time.
There's this dip to the left and then dip to the right. The pilot's trying to get this plane up.
Then all of a sudden there was a power burst. The plane seemed to stabilize itself.
You could feel that the pilot's trying to get control of it.
But a few seconds later, it became a mixmaster again.
I yelled out, emergency, grab your ankles, get your heads down.
Grab your ankles, get your heads down!
And I kept yelling that, and then I assumed my brace position. You could hear people screaming and yelling. There's loud, horrible sounds. We are clearly crashing.
The pilots are helpless. 49 seconds after lifting off, Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the bush, 950 meters west of runway 29.
There was carnage of the aircraft all over the place. I didn't know where I was. And at that point, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I'm still alive, that this is all happening so quickly.
When we crashed, we came down on an angle. It ripped the right side of the plane open, and that's how we got out, or else we probably would have never gotten out. Now, the prisoner was still in handcuffs, so I reached over and I took the cuffs off of him there, but he never left me. And then we exited the aircraft.
There's fire all around, there's explosions. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're full of fuel.
Guys, come this way.
And I started yelling, come this way, for people to follow my voice.
Come this way. Come on. We're gonna go
Passengers
this way.
scramble for safety before the fire spreads. 45 people survived the accident, but 24 people do not, including Captain Morwood and First Officer Mills. Emergency crews rush to the crash site deep in the woods. The injured are taken to hospital in Dryden.
I was very concerned because I kept looking at the wing all the time. I thought it was a lot of snow.
Well, I didn't notice anything wrong going down the runway. Like I said, it was just when we started hitting the trees, I knew there was something wrong.
Within 24 hours, a team of investigators from the Canadian Aviation Safety Board arrives at the scene.
You're going there, hopefully with the idea that you can find out what happened, why it happened, and how do you prevent it from happening in the future. We walked the entire path of the airplane to the threshold of the runway, and then we walked the flight path of the airplane right to the crash site. That was the first thing that I did. I wanted to document what I was seeing by photographing. When you walk in on an accident site like that, there are two things that overwhelm you. The smell of aviation jet fuel and the smell of death.
The trees just past the end of runway 29 give investigator David Roer and his team vital clues about the F-28's failed flight.
What happened was the airplane went off the end of the runway in what we would call ground effect and just stayed at that height, simply clipping the tops of the trees.
Look at how these treetops have been clipped off.
It didn't ever fly. You've got 24 people that died. You've got 2 pilots that died and a flight attendant that died. And they died, for the most part, trying to do their job. So you really want to do them justice, but you also have to be fair. And if there were mistakes made, mistakes have to be fixed.
From the rear of the fuselage, investigators recover the F-28's 2 black boxes, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. The devices are designed to withstand temperatures of 1100 degrees Celsius for up to 30 minutes. Investigators are frustrated to learn that the mylar tape from the recorders has suffered extreme heat damage. It's estimated the black boxes were scorched by an 1100-degree inferno for at least 90 minutes, far beyond their limit. The data is unrecoverable.
That was a big blow to us because now you have to try and gather information and try and establish that it's factual by independent routes.
We were just about to leave Thunder Bay and they gave us 10 new passengers.
Investigators must now rely heavily on eyewitness reports to reconstruct the events leading up to the doomed takeoff. They learned that the F-28 began its day in Winnipeg and was scheduled to fly a return route to Thunder Bay and back with a stopover in Dryden. But in Thunder Bay, plans changed. The cancellation of another flight forced the crew to pick up 10 additional passengers.
And when they did their calculations, they realized that we were overloaded and something had to come off.
All right, let's offload some fuel then.
They ended up removing fuel in order to be within the proper weight.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
So the flight was delayed an hour.
The extra weight of the new passengers left the crew no choice. They had to unload fuel to lighten their load. That meant when they arrived in Dryden, they needed to pump in more than the usual amount of fuel for the final leg back to Winnipeg. Roa wonders if the change in plans somehow led to a miscalculation of the weight and balance. Was the F-28 too heavy for takeoff? He then uncovers a puzzling detail. The plane's weight and balance form for the takeoff from Dryden was never collected as required. It burned in the fire. Roa is forced to use Air Ontario's standard averages to calculate passenger and baggage weights. The data, combined with the airport's fuel records, allows him to estimate the plane's gross takeoff weight.
We knew how many people we had on board. We knew how many bags we had on the airplane. And we knew what our fuel load was.
He estimates the F-28 weighed between 62,000 and 64,000 pounds.
And the airplane's max takeoff weight was 65,000 pounds. And so we came to the conclusion that the airplane was not overweight.
The cause of the crash remains a mystery. 18 days into the investigation, the Canadian government appoints Justice Virgil Moshansky to lead a more wide-ranging inquiry into all aspects of the aviation system that might have contributed to the Air Ontario tragedy.
The government was looking for an experienced trial judge, and preferably one who had an aviation background.
Moshansky is an experienced pilot with 13 years on the bench. He will work closely with crash investigator David Roa and aviation consultant Frank Black. The new team's first step, assessing the plane's technical systems.
The electrical system, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, all of these systems are looked at both in terms of what is their history leading up to the accident and what remnants are remaining at the crash site that can be examined.
Clues to a possible system failure arise when Sonia Hartwig recalls a troubling event aboard the same plane just days before the fatal crash.
I think it was Monday or Tuesday. When we took off, there was this smoke that filled the aircraft and there was this horrible smell. I thought, oh my God, we have a fire in the lab.
But there was no fire in the lavatory or anywhere else in the cabin.
They told us that apparently it had something to do with oil sitting in the APU system. So every takeoff that day, this would happen.
The auxiliary power unit is a generator that provides the power needed to start the engines. Did burning oil in the APU somehow cause a fire and ultimately doom Flight 1363? Roa searches the week's journey log for any mention of the auxiliary power unit. he makes a surprising discovery. The APU wasn't working on the day of the crash. It couldn't possibly have caused the fire. But the inoperative power unit may still have played a role in the tragedy. Investigators learned that it forced the crew to make a risky decision in Dryden.
Blown to the connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Normally, the captain would rely on the APU to restart his engines after shutting them both down for refueling.
But if he couldn't use his APU, he couldn't shut his engines down.
That meant Flight 1363 had to be refueled with one engine still running.
Captain Morwood is in a situation where he's got a hot refuel with passengers on board the aircraft. He's got to keep an engine running to refuel the airplane.
Hot refueling isn't against regulations, but the risk of a fuel spill makes it potentially dangerous. In Toronto in 1973, a maintenance person was killed when an Air Canada DC-8 jet was consumed by fire during refueling.
Hot refueling is not a normal practice.
Could the hot refueling have caused some kind of damage to the engines? The Dryden Airport manager, a former military pilot, suspects there was trouble with the plane's engines. He tells Roa he saw the takeoff from his office and heard a sharp, explosive noise just as it disappeared from view. To him, it signified a flameout or engine failure.
I thought, this is going to be a high-profile and potentially controversial investigation. And the only way to ensure that the truth stands up is to have hard evidence from the aircraft accident. And so we took the airplane completely and we put it in our lab in Ottawa.
Anything?
With signs pointing to engine failure as the cause of the crash,
strip it down.
Roa orders extensive engine testing.
Those engines were examined in detail for damage.
Roa finds the F-28's two Rolls-Royce engines suffered only minor structural damage. There's no evidence of an engine fire, nothing at all to suggest the engines had failed. With little physical evidence to explain the failed takeoff, investigators are back to square one. To solve the mystery, they comb through survivor and eyewitness statements. A common thread emerges.
They said in their witness statements there was snow and ice on the wings when the airplane attempted to take off.
Roa studies weather charts for clues.
We had very good meteorological information.
The charts show that during the half hour the F-28 was on the ground at Dryden Airport, visibility shrank from 4 kilometers to less than 1 kilometer because of the snowstorm.
And although we may find other reasons, for sure, snow and ice on the wings was a factor in this accident.
Sonia Hartwig tells investigators about an unusual sight during takeoff.
As we took off, I noticed that the wings just became a solid sheen of gray, shiny ice.
Investigators consult the F-28's manuals to study its anti-icing systems. They find that only the wing's leading edges are protected.
The aircraft had heated leading edges on the wings.
I wonder if the anti-icing system was working.
And the heat was provided by bleed air from the compressors on the engine. They found the valves that allow the compressed air access to the leading edges. And they tested the valve to see if it functioned, and it did.
The anti-icing system was working. But since it only heats the leading edge, it likely didn't clear ice that formed on the surface of Flight 1363's wings. Investigators suspect that snow and ice buildup, what experts call wing contamination, may have played a major role in the crash. To verify that suspicion, Roa and his team meet with engineers from FOCO.
Thanks for coming. Curious to see what you have.
Jack Van Hengst, who was the chief engineer, had extensive aerodynamic studies and data on the effects of contamination on an F-28 airplane.
Fokker engineers have run simulations of the crash.
They were able to get some very good data in terms of the performance of the airplane, simulating the type of loads, temperatures, etc., that the Dryden aircraft would have been exposed to.
Investigators make a crucial discovery about the design of the F-28. Because of the angle of the wings, a very small amount of ice makes the plane susceptible to stalling.
They concluded that even the most minute bit of contamination on the wing would disrupt the airflow and cause a loss of lift.
Well, that answers a lot of questions.
The simulations support what witnesses saw.
It just barely got airborne, dropping wings, losing lift, and then hitting trees, decelerating to the point where it broke up.
Investigators are now certain that contaminated wings caused the crash. But what's still unclear is why the plane was not de-iced before takeoff. Almost all airports in cold climates, including Dryden, are equipped with the technology to remove ice from a plane. But Captain Morwood never requested de-icing.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Investigators need to figure out why. They want to understand what made him risk his own life.
Let's hope it holds.
And the lives of the 68 other people on board Flight 1363. Investigators dig through Captain George Morwood's flight records and work history. They interview crew members, searching for clues to his behavior.
Captain Morwood was a very professional, very old-school pilot. He had his view on how things should be done properly and what his definition of proper and professional would be.
He also was very concerned about his passengers. He enjoyed making sure that they got on their flights on time and got to their destinations on time.
You know, Air Ontario was a growing company. It was their first foray into the jet operations. I'm sure that there were many things that Captain Morwood would have thought in his own mind, this is not how he would do it. And I'm sure at times he probably let the superiors know that.
Morwood's history shows he's delayed and cancelled flights in the past because of icing concerns. Roa is stumped. Why didn't he request de-icing in Dryden? Another pilot who was at Dryden Airport that day provides part of the answer. He heard Morwood on the phone to Air Ontario.
That is what I have been trying to tell you.
He was very frustrated, and he was really concerned about his passengers.
Morwood complained to the off-duty pilot about the company.
These guys. You want to guess my weight before I left Thunder Bay? 66 and change. I had to offload fuel. Now that... Right. So now what am I supposed to do? No. You figure it out.
When he left the terminal, he was observed by witnesses to appear to be very upset and very angry.
Investigators wonder what set Morwood off. They try to piece together the pilot's day on March the 10th.
This was the 5th day of a very long week for Captain Morwood. And he was the next day leaving with his family on a ski vacation.
Before his first flight of the day, he'd learned the plane's APU still wasn't working. And then, once in Thunder Bay, more bad news. After refueling, the dispatcher forces Morwood to take on 10 extra passengers. Now he must offload fuel and lose more time.
There goes the schedule. Let's, offload some fuel then.
This meant Morwood would leave Thunder Bay behind schedule.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
And Captain Morwood is the type of captain who didn't want to be late.
Now en route to Dryden, and an hour behind schedule, the weather forecast the crew was given of light rain and fog is no longer accurate.
And Captain Morwood didn't get the forecast of freezing rain coming into Dryden, which he should have had.
As Flight 1363 lands in Dryden, the weather was getting worse by the minute. The plane sat there for half an hour while snow built up on the wings.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Investigators may never know how concerned Morwood was about the weather. But there is evidence that it was on his mind. When Roa questions the fueling agent, he learns that Morwood did ask about de-icing moments before takeoff.
Is there de-icing available?
The fueling agent says he pointed out the de-icing ground crew to Morwood. The agent then offers a compelling reason that could explain why the captain didn't de-ice. Air Ontario had a policy prohibiting him from de-icing with an engine running.
The fluid can be ingested in the engines and then find its way from there to the air conditioning on the airplane and make it extremely noxious in the cabin portion of the airplane.
But if Morwood had shut down both engines, he wouldn't have been able to restart his plane.
Now, the only other way to start the airplane on the ground is with a ground-based air cart that can provide the compressed air. And Dryden did not have the capability to start the airplane.
The equipment would have had to be flown in from Winnipeg. It would have been a costly decision.
If he shut it down, he would ground the aircraft there effectively, requiring the billeting of passengers and hotels and at an expense to the airline for which he would be answerable.
Right. So now what?
So he was under a great deal of pressure.
No. You figure it out.
And I believe that the conversation on the phone would have been about that scenario and his displeasure with it. But he didn't have any other chance.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Though the amount of snow on the wings was still within limits, it's what lay under the snow that doomed the flight. The fuel in a plane's wing can get as cold as -40 degrees Celsius. The frigid fuel cools the metal surface of the wing. When snow hits this supercooled surface, it freezes instantly into a barely visible layer of ice. It's a process called cold soaking.
And this, of course, is what's disrupting the airflow on the wing and destroying the lifting capabilities.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 360.
The only reason that I can possibly think of that led to his decision to execute the takeoff was the fact that he didn't consider the cold soaking phenomena and the fact that those wings could still have ice on them.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario.
Perhaps not wanting to face the consequences of shutting down his engines, Morwood opted to take off for Winnipeg without de-icing his plane.
He must have concluded that the ice would blow off on takeoff. That is where he made a mistake, a tragic mistake.
But Mashansky concludes that despite his mistake, Captain Morwood is not solely responsible for the crash.
It wasn't simply pilot error. There were myriad of factors which were the cause of the accident.
One of the most important factors, Air Ontario's decision to let the plane fly with a broken APU.
They were deferring a lot of the maintenance that should have been done because of a shortage of parts. And then they had to scrounge around all across Canada with various F-28 operators to borrow parts from them. And this was a very bad move on the part of Air Ontario management.
The investigation determines that by cutting corners and focusing too much on the bottom line, the airline was putting all their passengers and employees at risk.
Because the F-28s were new to Air Ontario, there was this urgency to get one crew off and get the next crew on flying. this urgency to have them in the air producing money.
I came to the conclusion after a lot of thought about this accident that there were a lot of other hands on those throttles, pushing those throttles forward. There were a lot of people that were involved in the sequence of events that led to this tragic outcome.
This was a preventable accident, but everything conspired against the pilots.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Because Air Ontario management did not have a safety culture. And you have to have a safety culture from the top management down.
Knowing there are dozens of Fokker F-28s flying around the world, Justice Mashansky takes an unusual step. He releases a report well before his inquiry concludes.
Good afternoon.
It warns of the plane's vulnerability to ice buildup and stresses the need for frequent de-icing in winter conditions.
Even a small amount of icing would be disastrous on an F-28.
But 15 months later, it becomes clear that Mashansky's warnings have not been heard. US Air Flight 405 is preparing to fly from New York to Cleveland on March the 22nd, 1992. The plane is a Fokker F-28, and it's snowing. It's 1 degree below freezing. At 9 p.m., the jet is being de-iced for a second time since its arrival from Florida. In the past hour, an inch of snow has fallen and shows no signs of stopping.
US Air 405, clear to taxi runway 13.
The crew prepares for takeoff. Flight 405 is an hour and 45 minutes behind schedule when Captain Wallace Majeur starts taxiing to runway 13. Then, unexpectedly,
US Air 405, turn left into hold short of Echo.
Left on the inner to hold short of Echo.
At 9:07 p.m., Flight 405 is forced to wait on the taxiway near runway 13. Another 23 minutes pass. First Officer John Rashuba turns on a light that illuminates his wings. He checks the right wing for ice. He sees none.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
US Air 405, runway 13, clear for takeoff.
Even though it's now been 35 minutes since their last de-icing, the crew does not request another.
Takeoff thrusts set. Temp's okay.
Everything proceeds as it should. Until...
V1. Rotate.
Just after the F-28 begins its rotation.
The aircraft had enough flying speed to lift off. Barely lift off. The wings just could not support the airplane. They knew they were in trouble.
13 seconds after lifting off, Flight 405 crashes on the shore of Flushing Bay.
I don't think any pilot really thinks he's going to crash. They were trying to save the airplane right to the end.
27 of the 51 people on board are killed. Another Fokker F-28 has crashed with tragic consequences.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
Within days, investigator in charge Robert Benson suspects that ice on the wings was the major cause.
It would be very, very difficult for either of the pilots to really detect ice on the wings, looking backwards over their shoulders through the side windows of the airplane.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
So the captain was faced with quite a problem. If he wanted to be de-iced a third time, he would have had to get out on the lines, taxi all the way back into the parking area, and meet up with a de-icing truck again.
Takeoff thrusts.
That would have put him very, very late, and it may have even caused the cancellation of the flight.
After all of this work, after all of the efforts, To see it happen again was extremely frustrating.
There were no regulations in place requiring the crew to seek another de-icing after their extended delay. But Justice Mashansky had called attention to the dangers of long wait times when he issued his interim report.
If they had followed the recommendations in my second interim report, this accident certainly could have been averted.
He also had drawn attention to the limitations of the de-icing fluid being used at the time. Called Type 1 fluid, it's a mixture of antifreeze and water.
Those chemicals are designed that as you accelerate down the runway, that they'll actually shed off your wing, so that when you actually want the wing to lift and produce lift, that it's not contaminated.
Type 1 fluid is applied hot to de-ice the plane's surfaces. But it doesn't last long.
Type 1 fluid had a holdover time in their best conditions of about 15 minutes. Under poor conditions, such as freezing rain, it could be as low as 6 minutes.
During the Air Ontario investigation, Mashansky's team reached a stark conclusion about the effectiveness of Type 1 fluid. Even if Captain Morwood could have de-iced his plane in Dryden,
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
it may have made no difference.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
Unbelievable.
Flight 1363 had to wait for the troubled Cessna 150 to land.
By the time he waited for this 150 aircraft and pilot to land, and then they backtracked and got into position, now they're in a serious snowstorm, and they are getting contaminated.
Even if Morwood had de-iced during his 30 minutes on the ground,
Rotate.
the delay may have been enough for the fluid to stop working. The plane's wings may once again have become coated in ice.
It came out in the examination of Air Ontario pilots that there was a dire need for training in terms of how the de-icing, anti-icing systems worked and how long your aircraft was protected.
As soon as our accident occurred up in New York, we of course understood that it was a similar aircraft, in fact a nearly identical aircraft to the Dryden accident airplane. The circumstances were similar in both accidents, and the Dryden report was a tour de force, which helped us focus our investigation quite a bit.
Justice Mashansky had released his interim report more than a year before the crash of Flight 405. His recommendations could have prevented it. Mashansky would soon discover that a breakdown in communication had cost the lives of 27 people in New York. During his inquiry, Justice Mashansky learned that there was another type of de-icing fluid available to the airline industry. It's called Type 2 fluid. It's thicker than Type 1, which prevents it from immediately flowing off an aircraft.
A Type 2 fluid is a much more gooey substance. I've heard it referred to as almost mucus-like.
With holdover times of up to 45 minutes, it keeps ice from accumulating, then blows off the plane's surfaces at takeoff. 15 months before the US air crash, Mashansky recommended greater use of the thicker Type 2 fluid. Mashansky's investigators also studied de-icing practices at Toronto's Pearson Airport.
We got hold of a film crew, and we waited and watched the weather very carefully until we found a forecast of freezing rain. And we tracked one aircraft which was heading for the Caribbean.
The investigators discovered an alarming gap in the time between de-icing and takeoff.
And from the time the aircraft was de-icing on the gate until the time the aircraft took off was somewhere in the order of 41 minutes. So there was no doubt that aircraft were departing Pearson Airport with a partially or largely contaminated wing surface. We then went to Chicago O'Hare. This was the first airport to actually put in place runway end de-icing pads. And it was very useful in terms of explaining to us how these had evolved, what type of de-icing equipment they were using on them, how they worked.
At the time of the US Air crash, LaGuardia did not offer de-icing at the runway, only at the gate. Again, 15 months before the crash, Justice Mashansky recommended the placement of de-icing facilities at runways instead of terminal gates. Mashansky also recommended that pilots not only inspect their wings from the cockpit,
looks pretty good to me as far as I can see,
but also from the cabin.
US Air 405, runway 13, cleared for takeoff.
Mashansky claims that his report could have prevented the crash at LaGuardia. But the Federal Aviation Administration claims it never received his report in 1990, and therefore couldn't pass the information along to airlines and pilots. But Justice Mashansky doesn't accept that.
My second interim report went out in December of 1990. It was about a year and a half before the LaGuardia crash occurred. So I think probably sat on somebody's desk.
The crash of Flight 1363 resulted in dozens of recommendations that could save lives. The crash of Flight 405 ensured those recommendations were widely implemented.
Well, there was a lot that came out of Dryden. I mean, the commission came out with 192 recommendations. It changed the whole nature of how we approach contamination.
We now have runway end de-icing pads, so they can get a final de-icing before they take off. This was something directly the result of the Dryden Commission inquiry.
Today, most airlines use a new type of de-icing fluid. Type 4 de-icing fluid lasts longer. It will stick to a wing for up to 2 hours. As well, air traffic controllers must now be able to tell flight crews how long they will be delayed at the runway after being de-iced.
Dryden is really the first accident that explored not only what happens in the pointed end of an airplane, but what happens within a corporate culture. It put CEOs on notice that they can't hide in the woodwork when an accident occurs.
Dutch manufacturer Fokker went bankrupt in 1996. Despite this, in 2009, there were still 55 Fokker F-28 jets in operation worldwide, mostly in warmer climates.
Nobody should ever lose their life due to a contamination accident again in commercial aviation, anywhere in a snow and ice environment. We've learned all the lessons.
Just minutes from Strasbourg Airport, an Airbus A320 slams into a mountaintop.
Delta Alpha, your position?
There are survivors.
I'm not panic because I'm going to burn.
But they are still in grave danger. It's bitterly cold, and what they don't realize is that no one knows where they are.
They could be anywhere in there.
Expect this in the jungle or the rainforest, but not in a highly populated area.
Before investigators can begin searching for what caused the crash of Air Inter Flight 148, they must first find the plane. January the 20th, 1992. Air Inter Flight 148 has departed from Lyon, France.
124.905, thank you.
Captain Christian Hequet and First Officer Joël Charubin are experienced pilots with over 12,000 hours of flying time between them. The flight is a short hop between Lyon in central France and the city of Strasbourg in the mountainous Alsace region. The French airline Air Inter caters mostly to business travelers and prides itself on being timely. Crews are motivated to avoid delays, as former Air Inter pilot Gérard Arnoux explains.
We were famous for a very short turnaround. And the faster we flew, the better wages we got.
Have we been flying for 35 minutes yet?
41 minutes.
The crew is flying an Airbus A320, one of the most technologically advanced commercial airplanes in the world. Even before takeoff, the pilots programmed the autopilot to land on a specific runway in Strasbourg. The cockpit of the A320 is also very different from other planes. Instead of analog gauges, the pilots look mostly at digital displays.
Strasbourg, good evening. Runway News 05. Transition level 50. Wind 040 at 18 knots. Visibility 10 kilometers.
A recording from Strasbourg Airport informs the crew of a change in plan. Due to high winds and poor winter weather, they'll have to land on an alternate runway.
05 in service.
Not the one programmed into the autopilot.
05. What sort of wind are they giving us?
18 knots.
18 knots.
Captain Hequet doesn't like the idea of changing runways.
No chance.
He was hoping to use runway 23, an approach that provides the autopilot with a precise navigational fix. The new runway, runway 05, is surrounded by mountainous terrain that can interrupt radio signals sent to the autopilot.
You know, if we go with the runway 05 procedure, we... Oh, no.
Captain Hequet suggests a compromise.
I'm putting back runway 23. Otherwise, I couldn't make the ILS interception.
He'll program the autopilot to fly towards runway 23. But near the airport, the captain will take over the controls and make a visual landing on runway 05.
You're taking 23 then?
Yes!
Ladies and gentlemen, we are commencing our descent. We ask you to please return to your seats.
Nicolas Scourias is a university graduate student.
It was a quiet day. I was expecting to go to see my girlfriend in Strasbourg, so I was very happy.
Roger 854, proceed to GTQ air level 140, contact Reims.
Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
Yes, we intend to proceed to do an ILS on runway 23, then an indirect for runway 05 after that.
The Strasbourg controller considers the captain's plan. He warns that there will likely be a delay due to heavy traffic.
Given that we're going to have 3 takeoffs on 05, you risk waiting in a stack at 5,000 feet.
We're not going to mess about like that, descending at full speed. If they had warned us in advance, cripes!
Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
I hear you.
Aware of the captain's frustration, the controller offers assistance.
If you want, I can take you with the radar to lead you to Andlo at 5,000.
Andlo is a navigational point on the approach to runway 05. It helps pilots align the plane for landing.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh yeah.
Okay then, turn left to heading 230 degrees.
148.
Turn left to heading 230 degrees.
There you are. That will save you some time.
Since runway 05 doesn't allow for a full autopilot approach, the captain must calculate the angle of descent on his own.
That makes 3.3 degrees.
Donc 3,3, c'est tout à fait normal, oui.
3.3 degrees is a normal flight angle that provides a good slope for landing.
Doucement, la bonne pente, voilà.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing our descent.
The flight from Lyon to Strasbourg was quite short. I think 50 or 45 minutes. Nothing special. It was very natural and very ordinary.
Thank you.
Turn left, steer 90. 090 degrees, Delta Alpha.
The controller talks Flight 148 through the last turn to align the plane with the runway, now 25 kilometers away. Then, First Officer Cherubin notices the plane is slightly off course.
We're headed inside. You're inside there. You should have started with 070.
Yeah.
At least that much.
The controller also notices that the plane is off course.
Air Inter, Delta Alpha.
It has missed aligning itself with ANDLO, the runway's electronic guidepost.
Delta Alpha, you're passing to the right of Anlo.
Nevertheless, he authorizes the landing.
Authorized for final approach 05.
Delta Alpha.
The captain initiates the landing sequence.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2. Flaps at 2.
Gear down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to land in a few minutes.
Heke notices that the plane is traveling too fast, so he extends the speed brakes. They disrupt airflow over the wing, which helps create more drag to slow the plane.
We have to watch our descent.
The approach axis.
The first officer is more concerned with their horizontal position in relation to the runway.
It was 60. Check it out.
Right.
But before the crew can adjust their course,
Delta Alpha, your position? Air Inter, Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
the crash is catastrophic. The A320 has flown into the side of a mountain.
Delta Alpha, your position?
Flight 148 is no longer on radar, nor responding to radio contact. An emergency is declared at Strasbourg Airport.
This is the last hit we got. We were flying about 20 kilometers away from the airport.
Officials need to pinpoint the crash site, but it's not as easy as it might seem. The airport's radar is not recorded. There has been no signal from the plane's emergency beacon, and surprisingly, no one has reported seeing a plane go down.
It could be anywhere in here.
The proposed search area covers more than 20 square kilometers of dense forest just outside Strasbourg. Nicolas Scaria survives the crash of Air Inter Flight 148 with only minor injuries.
I took off my seatbelt. I get up, I try to find my suitcase in the lockers, but there wasn't any lockers. I realized that I was alive. It was a crash. I saw a fire in front of me, and I panicked because I said to myself, I'm going to burn. I went to the back of the plane, of what remained of the plane. I found some other survivors.
Come on! It's gonna blow!
I was afraid of the explosion. I was panicked.
With the smell of leaking jet fuel in the air, the survivors move away from the burning plane.
We stayed together, waiting for the first aid.
But the wait will be longer than anyone might expect.
The first reaction that we have after the crash was, okay, in half an hour, 1 hour, most and the worst, okay, the rescue team will be here. And it wasn't here.
1 hour after the crash, rescuers still have no idea where the wreckage lies. Skouras and the others now face a new ordeal. Surviving sub-zero temperatures in a dark and isolated forest. 2.5 hours after Flight 148 disappeared from radar near Strasbourg Airport, the missing plane has still not been located. Amidst growing tension, the French Aviation Bureau, the BEA, sends in its lead investigator, Jean Pariès.
I immediately called my two main investigators, and we organized the GO team, and we got prepared to rush to the site as soon as this site was located somewhere.
The delay feels like an eternity.
A little bit surprisingly long. We can expect this in the jungle or the rainforest, but not exactly in a highly dense populated area like the Strasbourg area.
With no help in sight, Skouras returns to the wreckage to look for more survivors.
I think that some people that die could have survived if the first aid come sooner.
Nearly 1,000 people search for the missing plane. But 3 hours after the crash, there's still no sign of it. Frustrated, Skouras goes looking for help. He stumbles into a TV crew trying to find the crash. But with no wreckage in sight, they react with skepticism.
They didn't expect survivors from an airplane crash.
Hey, you have to believe me!
They didn't believe that I was one of the survivors, but believe me, I was, because my face was black due to the smoke, the kerosene, and so on.
Come on!
The journalists follow him back to the crash site, where they discover 8 other survivors. Finally, the first rescuers arrive. The crash site is located near the top of the 2,500-foot Mont Saint-Odile, 19 kilometers from the runway.
They found us after 4 hours and 30 minutes. So it was a mess. I was very, very disappointed that at 20 kilometers from Strasbourg, and they couldn't find us.
A total of 87 passengers and crew have died, including the pilot and co-pilot. The survivors begin to tell their stories, but no one reports anything that might explain why the plane crashed.
I don't know what happened. We were landing. I lost all consciousness. We must have hit the trees.
Bob McIntosh, an American NTSB investigator, arrives at the crash site.
The BEA of France
recognized the international attention would be on this accident, even though it was a domestic accident. He invited a group of international accident investigators to come and participate.
Welcome to the team. The first priority for investigators is to retrieve the plane's black boxes.
We have not removed the recorders yet.
With the boxes trapped in the burning tail section, any delay could prove costly.
We're very anxious about the state of the tape inside. Will it be possible to use it? Will we get the critical information we need?
In France, aviation accidents are also investigated by the justice system. Paris and his team are not allowed access to the site until judicial officials secure the black boxes.
I had a visual picture of the gendarme, transport police standing around keeping us away from the wreckage for a while. And we're very suspicious of these international observers.
Maybe we should wait.
Even taking photographs, which was somewhat surprising to us.
In a previous crash, the crash of Air France Flight 296 in 1988, investigators waited 10 days before turning the black boxes over to police. Rumors persisted that these boxes had been tampered with. This time, police are keeping investigators at bay.
I can recall seeing the glowing embers and seeing the flight recorder sitting there and not being able to intervene and say, get that thing cooled down as soon as you can.
After midnight, the boxes are retrieved from the plane and sent for analysis. Investigators can only hope it's not too late.
They was extremely hot. They looked damaged, they looked burned.
On découvre l'Airbus disloqué à 500 mètres.
In the light of day, investigators get some of their first clues from the crash site itself. They discover why the plane's emergency locator beacon didn't send a signal.
It was actually destroyed by the impact.
The beacon is located inside the cockpit and is designed to start working after a crash. Its failure suggests an unusually forceful impact with the ground.
We had this first feeling that the descent was abnormally steep.
Investigators examine the engines to see if they may have stalled before impact.
If you find the blades curved and a lot of wood sucked inside the engines, then you understand that the engines were working properly.
And that's exactly what they find. The plane clearly had power, yet it plowed steeply into a mountainside without ever sending out a distress signal. Investigators are puzzled. They hope that the box which recorded the plane's flight data will help them solve the mystery.
Those particular recorders had the best survival record of any recorders. They were the top of the line as far as survivability is concerned.
The black box is designed to survive temperatures up to 1100 degrees Celsius for half an hour. The tape recorder inside is protected by a capsule filled with water.
When the recorder heats up, the water turns to steam, absorbing the energy, and actually vents out through a little hole in the crash enclosure.
But when the flight data recorder is opened, investigators make a troubling discovery.
The FDR was totally damaged. Impossible to read anything from it.
It was subjected to heat beyond the 30 minutes. The recorder was just never designed to withstand that kind of sustained heat.
And so we were very disappointed.
There's now only one hope for recovering the plane's flight data, a device called a Quick Access Recorder, or QAR. Maintenance workers use the QAR to access the plane's computers, but it also records some flight data. Unlike the black boxes, the QAR is stored near the cockpit.
Quick access recorders are not protected at all. They're up in the front end of the aircraft, typically in the electronics bay. They're generally destroyed just from the impact damage.
Investigators are encouraged to discover that in this case, the QAR has survived. But on closer examination, their optimism turns to frustration.
The last 20 centimeters of the tape were burned and stretched and were damaged to the point that we could not use them into a machine. We couldn't read it.
Investigators are desperate to retrieve the data, so they take a chance on an experimental technique. Known as the garnet technique, a light is shone through a mineral lens made of garnet.
Use a garnet stone to visualize the magnetic pulses that are actually recorded on the tape.
The special lens helps the technicians differentiate between the positive and negative magnetic pulses, which translate as binary digits or bits.
There's 768 bits per second, so that's a lot of ones and zeros. You have to be very precise in moving the tape under the lens or the garnet to make sure you don't miss a bit or read the same bit twice, you know? So it's difficult.
Analyzing the data is even more painstaking.
It took about a day to read a second of recording. Any additional second recovered could reveal something that would make a difference.
The effort to retrieve all the QAR data could take a month or more. In the meantime, the focus of the investigation shifts to the cockpit voice recorder. It was positioned just above the other black box.
The cockpit voice recorder, which was just inches away, but outside of the ashes, had air passing over it, survived.
Runway 23. Otherwise...
The recording reveals the captain's anxiety early on in the flight.
You're taking 23 then?
Yes!
Investigators know that landing on runway 05 requires what's called a non-precision approach. That means pilots receive electronic guidance only on their horizontal position, left and right. They get no guidance when it comes to altitude.
The non-precision approach is significantly less accurate. Why, it's not really difficult, but they are less comfortable.
05. What sort of wind are they giving us?
The non-precision approach increases the demands on the pilots. Investigators can also hear that the captain had concerns about landing on runway 05.
48 Delta Alpha, you are number 1 with QR DME runway 05.
Runway 05.
10 nautical. That won't work.
It's a lot of distress over a non-precision approach.
Wondering what can cause such distress, investigators research pilot training at Air Inter. They find that most pilots did not have extensive training making non-precision landings in the new A320.
I think we should have had double the training compared to an older plane.
Investigators ask the airline for detailed records on the pilot's history of runway approaches. They're intrigued by what they discover. Captain Heke had landed at Strasbourg countless times, but he had never landed an A320 there using a non-precision approach.
We're not going to mess around like that descending at full speed.
Clearly, the captain was uneasy about having to execute a landing he had never made before.
I think the captain was worried about making it in a minimum amount of time, in the minimum amount of delay.
Have we been flying for 35 minutes yet?
And the co-pilot was worried about not getting in trouble by offending the captain.
At least that much.
More research into the pilot's work history offers yet another revelation. While the two pilots had flown more than 12,000 hours between them, they were both still relatively new to the highly advanced A320.
It's 05 in service.
The aviation community misunderstood the magnitude of changes brought by the new Airbus A320.
The captain had only 162 hours in the A320, and the co-pilot even less, just 61 hours.
Behind this accident scenario, there's an issue of confidence of the crew in themselves, in the aircraft.
18 knots. No chance.
They were not prepared, really, to fly in this kind of condition.
If they had warned us in advance, cripes!
Investigators conclude that the crew's training was insufficient. But that alone does not explain the crash.
Merde!
Investigators search for other factors in the crash of Flight 148. They review the conversations between the crew and air traffic controllers.
If you want, I can give you radar headings and take you to Anlo at 5,000.
Yeah, that's good.
The radar vector makes flying easier. The captain was happy because it was reducing his workload.
Turn left, steer 90.
With the controller's assistance, this landing should have been very simple. But when investigators reconstruct the plane's trajectory using radar information from various stations around the airport, they discover a shocking error.
The 090 heading started here.
090, 0 degrees, Delta Alpha.
But it won't take them to Andlo. Last radar vector the controller gave was incorrect. It sent them...
Thank you.
...closer to the mountain.
They were, of course, because of following the heading they got from the radar vectoring, they found themselves in this undershoot situation.
You're inside there. You should have started with 070.
Yeah.
Investigators are also troubled by the controller's choice of words when he warned the pilots, incorrectly, that they were headed to the right.
Delta Alpha, you're passing to the right of Anlo.
From the pilot's perspective, the plane was on the left side of the runway, not the right. It could only add to their confusion.
Le contrôleur, en fait, il a fait un...
It was very poor guidance because he didn't employ the usual terminology.
Et il n'a pas utilisé la phraséologie standard.
Investigators recommend that controllers use only compass points when giving directions. Never the words right and left. The controller's mistakes clearly brought the plane closer to the mountain.
Turn left, steer 90. 090.
But once again, investigators feel they don't have the whole story.
It's not something totally abnormal to start a descent from this situation.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2.
It's not what you expected to do every day, but it's not outside the tolerance of the concept of this approach.
Gear down.
When investigators study the plane's reconstructed flight path, they discover something more alarming than the plane's horizontal misdirection. As it circled the mountain, the plane inexplicably entered a dangerously steep and rapid descent.
Perhaps 2.5 times the normal rate of descent.
That's lethal at that altitude.
Without the steep descent, they would have cleared the mountain.
If the vertical trajectory had been correct, they would have no problem at all.
Finding the cause of that sudden descent is now key to understanding why 87 people died in one of the most advanced passenger planes on Earth.
Authorized for final approach 05.
The descent was initiated at 1800 hours, 19 minutes and 38 seconds. That
Delta Alpha
is the point of no return.
By studying Flight 148's trajectory, investigators determined that the rapid descent began 60 seconds before the crash. There is no indication on tape that the descent was deliberate. How it happened and why the crew didn't notice is a mystery.
It should be a no-brainer. Keeping track of the altitude.
The cockpit altimeter gives pilots a constant readout of their altitude.
Altimeter, that's a very precise instrument. They become very reliable. They're accurate to within 5 or 10 feet.
Ignoring it would be a major error in flying protocol.
Flaps towards 2.
The recording reveals just one single remark from the crew about their descent.
We have to watch our descent.
It occurred 16 seconds before the crash. The captain had just extended the speed brakes.
The aircraft was accelerating abnormally. The captain started to realize there was something wrong with the descent rate.
But the first officer changed the subject.
The approach axis. We're hitting the axis a half point off.
There. It was 60. Check it out.
He refocused the captain's attention on the lateral situation rather than the vertical situation, which was the main problem, of course. And they both failed to recognize this situation.
I think they were planning they were going to break out of the clouds so they'd be able to see the runway, and they wouldn't need to do the full instrument approach.
It was 60. Check it out.
But the plane never left the clouds.
There's an old adage in aviation. Rocks have been known to hide out in those clouds.
It now seems clear that the crew was not monitoring their altitude closely enough. But a bigger mystery remains.
We can only guess why.
What caused that deadly descent? After months of work, investigators may finally have the answer. All the available flight data from the damaged quick-access recorder has been recovered.
We were very anxious to be able to read as much as we could.
The data confirms that just before the crash, the plane was speeding towards the ground at an extremely high rate, 3,300 feet per minute. It also confirms that the angle of descent was dangerously steep, much greater than the 3.3 degrees selected by the captain.
3.3 degrees.
That's quite a difference.
Investigators now wonder, did the autopilot malfunction? Did it somehow fail to obey the captain's safe descent angle and send the plane into a deadly nosedive?
But what state was it in before the accident?
Unfortunately, the flight control unit which houses the autopilot is too badly damaged to provide any definitive answers.
We could never demonstrate that this FCU on this aircraft during this flight functioned properly or not.
But then, when he returns to studying the flight data, Paris discovers something that may finally reveal the cause of the crash. He notices a similarity between two key numbers: the plane's vertical speed, 3,300 feet per minute, and the intended flight path angle, 3.3 degrees.
Coincidence?
Paris uses a flight simulator to test a new theory.
Can you show me a descent of 3,300 feet per minute?
He believes that the similarity is no mere coincidence. On the autopilot, there are two descent modes: flight path angle and vertical speed. But they are both displayed on the same window. So 3,300 is abbreviated to 33.
Now, show me a flight angle of minus 3.3 degrees.
The problem on this aircraft was that the two values were visible on the same window and controlled by the same knob.
3.3 degrees.
Minus 3.3 degrees.
Paris strongly suspects that the confusing display tripped up Captain Hackey.
So it wouldn't be hard to make that mistake, would it?
The confusion is quite easy between the two modes if you don't do it carefully.
This
If the captain failed to push the mode selector knob, then entering 33 would not have initiated a safe 3.3-degree angle of descent. Instead, it would have put the plane into a deadly rate of descent of 3,300 feet per minute. Two months after the crash, another Air Inter plane enters a dangerously steep descent for the same reason.
The crew only discovered the problem when they broke out of the clouds.
Those pilots also confused the plane's flight path angle with its vertical speed.
They were lucky enough to have a much higher cloud base, so they could correct the problem.
Further research reveals an industry-wide problem with the A320.
Many people confuse these modes, especially during training, and many of them fell in the trap even after the training.
Eager to test his new theory, Jean Pariès programs a simulator with all the known data from Flight 148.
Okay.
He then inputs the same rate of descent he believes the Air Inter pilots selected. If Pariès is correct, the simulation will end with the plane hitting the mountain. But it doesn't.
We're missing something.
Strangely, this didn't lead to a crash. Every approach would overfly this obstacle by a significant margin.
Have we factored in the wind?
We started to work on other alternate hypotheses.
Let's try again, but initiate the turn sooner.
But nothing was really credible.
No matter how hard he tries, Pariès cannot simulate the crash. Unable to explain why, he turns to the plane's manufacturer for help.
Thanks for bringing this to my
After
attention.
much research, an Airbus designer comes to Pariès with an explanation about a little-known element of the Autopilot's design. In emergency situations where the A320 needs to change direction quickly, the Autopilot is programmed to reverse the plane's direction at twice the normal rate.
The reaction of the Autopilot would be much faster. And these cases were typically when you were descending and asking the Autopilot to climb, or climbing and asking the Autopilot to descend. We immediately went back to the data at the very second at which the descent was commanded by the crew.
Gear down.
Pariès discovers a tragic coincidence.
Sadly, we found that at this very second, there was turbulence.
There was an ascent. It's very slight, but there it is.
The momentary turbulence caused the plane to climb slightly.
And this led to a positive 600 feet per minute vertical speed for maybe half a second.
It was during that same half second that the crew commanded the plane to descend.
It was 60, check it out.
The autopilot read this as an emergency requiring a blazingly fast descent.
That could be it.
Investigators now contemplate a terrible thought. Could a random gust of wind, hitting at exactly the wrong split second, have been the difference between life and death?
Here it comes.
And we got a crash.
Pariès' theory explains every aspect of the crash. The crew's confusion with the autopilot display
3.3 degrees
caused the plane to descend dangerously close to the mountain. Turbulence and an obscure safety feature brought it even closer. It was a fatal combination.
It's a fascinating lesson about the random dimension of accidents. Half a second before, half a second later, they wouldn't have the accident.
The discovery of a confusing cockpit display has enormous implications for the entire industry.
The flight instrumentation of aircraft like the DC-10, MD-11s, the 747s and so on, all the Boeing products and all the commuter products that were using that avionics suite had this vulnerability about it.
Investigators now face a daunting question affecting aircraft safety around the world. If the design of the autopilot interface isn't changed, how many more people could die? There's mounting evidence that the design of the autopilot interface on Airbus A320s led the Air Inter pilots to accidentally dial in a dangerous rate of descent.
3.3 degrees.
We felt a need to start the industry to work on this.
The plane's manufacturer, Airbus, responds immediately.
The main change, which was very quickly made, was to change the display window.
With the new design, if a pilot selects a vertical speed of 3,300, the entire 4-digit number is displayed.
So the confusion between an angle and a vertical speed was no longer possible.
For investigators, only one mystery remains. All Airbus A320 jets are designed to be equipped with a safety device known as a Ground Proximity Warning System, or GPWS.
Which is a downward-looking single-purpose radar that tells you how high you are above the ground directly beneath the airplane. And if it gets to be too low, it'll set off a warning.
Pull up, terrain. Pull up.
But Captain Hake
We have to watch our descent.
never received a warning for one very simple reason. His A320 didn't have that alarm.
The first question, of course, was why the aircraft was not equipped.
So it's not part of the minimum equipment list.
The Air Inter management had decided they did not like the false warnings that had been produced by GPWS equipment.
Normally, most planes fly slower than 250 knots when under 10,000 feet, but we flew at 350 knots until the final approach. So at those speeds, GPWS was always giving off false alarms.
Dans ces conditions, parce qu'il générait des fausses alarmes.
This decision, while legal, prevented the pilots from having one last line of defense before crashing into the mountain.
C'est pas possible d'imaginer un instant.
It's impossible to imagine that the pilot wouldn't have pulled up if he'd heard the alarm.
We should have a GPWS on commercial flights in any case, yes. That's an obvious conclusion.
The report will list these causes: flight deck aeronautics.
Investigators conclude that there was no single cause for the crash of Flight 148.
Training, lack of GPWS.
The tragedy involved an ill-fated combination of many different weaknesses in the airline industry.
We made 35 or so recommendations, including pilot training, about the ground proximity warning system, and so on.
The recommendations lead to sweeping changes. Pilots must now have more A320 training before getting behind the controls.
Le pilote, je crois, qui est...
One of the two pilots now need to have at least 300 hours on the plane. They estimated that 300 hours were enough.
Il parlait de 800, il parlait d'un niveau d'expertise.
Another change, the design of a more heat-resistant black box.
The FAA did a test, did some studies, what the thermal characteristics of post-crash fires were, came up with a value of 260 degrees C for 10 hours.
Delta Alpha, your position? Air Inter, Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
As a result of the Strasbourg crash, the A320 is now a safer plane.
You can only get this change if there is what people perceive to be a good reason. And sadly, a good reason is still an accident.
But improved aviation technology is still no substitute for well-trained, well-prepared pilots.
There's an old axiom in aviation that you taught early on, that never let an airplane take you somewhere that your brain hasn't visited at least 5 minutes ahead of time. This is an excellent example of a flight crew that didn't follow that particular axiom.
Miami Beach, Florida. Sun, sand, and calm blue seas. But when a tourist points his camera towards the sky, he captures a scene of horror. A plane is falling to the sea.
We have a code 4. Repeat, code 4. The plane down in the water.
As soon as I saw this, I realized, I'm like, oh no, this is the Chalk's airplane crashing.
The downed plane is Chalk's Ocean Airways Flight 101, bound for the Bahamas.
Could it have been a collision with an object? Could it have been a fire? Could it have actually been a criminal act?
Let's notify the FBI.
The incredibly rare video may hold the answers.
Can you enhance that for me?
An airline renowned for safety has made a fatal error. But it will take investigators hundreds of hours to finally uncover it.
Bingo.
The Port of Miami, December the 19th, 2005. Giant freighters and ocean-going cruise ships are a common sight. But there's another, much smaller craft that's often seen in this port. Chalk's Ocean Airways flies seaplanes in and out of this busy waterway. Today, Flight 101 from Fort Lauderdale is making a brief stopover here on its way to the Bahamas.
Feather propellers.
Check.
Shut down engine number 1.
Shutting down engine number 1.
Chalk's flies to 2 regular destinations, both in the Bahamas. Bimini, where Flight 101 is scheduled to land this afternoon, and Paradise Island.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking.
We're just making a short stopover here in Miami to pick up a couple passengers. We apologize for the delay. We'll be on our way again soon.
How many are we picking up?
Just 2, but they're VIPs.
For a small community like Bimini, Chalk's seaplanes are a lifeline.
And it's just so much easier in the seaplane to get to the North Island where most of the population is than going to the airport down there. So that was the main thing. It was a convenience factor.
Welcome aboard. Let's see your boarding passes.
Certainly.
Sergio Danguilacourt is a Bacardi rum executive. He's the great-great-grandson of the company's founder. The family is well known in the local Cuban community for their anti-Castro politics. He and his wife are flying to the Bahamas to buy a yacht.
Passengers settled in?
We're all set.
Good afternoon, folks.
We'd like to welcome you aboard Chalk's Ocean Airways Flight 101 to Bimini. Our travel time to Bimini will be 25 minutes.
Hope you enjoy the flight. Let's have the startup checklist, please.
Roger.
Michelle Marks is in command of today's flight. She was promoted to captain earlier this year.
Fuel conditioners.
First Officer Paul DeSanctis joined the airline 8 months ago.
Starter on.
Starter on.
This is his first flight with Captain Marks.
All clear to taxi?
All clear.
The Grumman Mallard is a twin turboprop design. It has a V-shaped hull and underwing pontoons. It's designed to carry up to 17 passengers. The plane has retractable landing gear, so it can operate on either land or sea.
Gear coming up.
Takeoff in the Mallard, depending on the days, it could be a lot of fun or it could be a real challenge.
Weight and balance check. We're good.
The Miami seaplane base has no control tower. The crew has to keep a lookout for boat traffic as they taxi through one of the busiest ports in the world.
Taking off out of Miami in the shipping channel, it's kind of like trying to take off during rush hour traffic. You've got boat traffic, wave traffic, the wind, the airplane to deal with, and everybody's going different speeds, and you're trying to get up and go and navigate around everybody, so it was always a handful.
Flight 101 will take off from X-44, a seaplane base near a channel known as Government Cut.
Prepare for takeoff.
Roger. Ready to take off.
Both pilots have their hand on the throttles. It's to prevent the captain from inadvertently pulling back if the plane hits a wave.
45 knots. 50 knots.
This is the moment most passengers are paying for, the takeoff. Half speedboat, half plane. It's a unique thrill.
75 knots. 80 knots.
For the pilots, accelerating through the waves is often the most difficult part of the flight.
The airplane itself was really hard to fly as far as on the water, getting onto the step, which is what we call getting on plane. And in rough sea conditions and in rough wave conditions, it could be a real challenge.
But this takeoff goes smoothly. Flight 101 is no longer a boat, it's now a plane en route to Bimini. It's 2:38 in the afternoon. The plane's flight path takes it past South Beach, where sunbathers and surfers are out in force. Just less than a minute into the flight, the Grumman Mallard is climbing through 500 feet, well below the clouds. Then, the plane rolls violently and dives. The pilots barely have time to register what's happening. Their struggles are in vain. By chance, a tourist from New York catches Flight 101's final moments on his camera. 60 seconds after takeoff, the plane slams into the ocean. Lucas Bocanegra is a lifeguard stationed on South Beach near the Chalks Ocean Airways sea lane.
As soon as I saw this, I realized, I'm like, oh no, this is the Chalks airplane crashing.
We have a code 4. Repeat, code 4. A plane down in the water.
This is Lucas. We're launching the jet ski.
The two lifeguards are the first rescuers to go looking for the plane.
We drove as fast as we could to the scene of the accident. There was a lot of things coming through my head. I was nervous, scared. I was kind of full of adrenaline. We wanted to go in and try to rescue as many people as we could, but at the same time, we've never trained for a situation like this. As soon as we turned government cut, those jetty rocks, we noticed that it was very calm, very quiet. It wasn't like the ocean side where it was very rough. There was no waves. It was very, kind of very eerie.
At first, Lucas Bocanegra finds no sign of Flight 101 or any of the passengers.
Little by little, we started seeing debris float up onto the surface of the water. And we saw some chairs, some luggage here and there, and suddenly we noticed it was a body in the water. As soon as we put the body on our jet ski, we realized that from his injuries that there was nothing we could do. From there, it was just try to recover as many bodies, you know, bring them back for their families.
News crews swarmed the beach.
Chalk's Flight 101 plummeted into the channel in full view of tourists lining Miami Beach.
Even a fraction of a second, the whole plane was engulfed in flames.
Black smoke and then an explosion. Pure fire in the sky.
It was so surreal, we couldn't believe that we actually witnessed that.
Chopper 4 over the wreckage as Miami Beach Coast Guard look for any survivors.
But the effort is futile.
We retrieved some of the bodies, but we were unable to find anyone that had survived.
All 20 people on board are dead, including pilots Paul DeSanctis and Michelle Marks. The residents of Bimini are devastated by the horrific news.
I was very sad for the crew and the friends that I had lost on the airplane. You never expect an accident to actually happen. And to see that on television like I did, it was very, very sad.
In Washington, senior NTSB investigator Bill English is put on the case.
I was just in my office doing some routine paperwork for something else, and the director stuck his head around the corner and said, "Oh, there's been an accident." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he mentioned a Grumman mallard. So I immediately knew it had to be Chalk's.
Within hours, investigators are at the crash site, where 19 bodies have been recovered. One is still missing.
I was very familiar with Chalk's Airways. I'm a seaplane-rated pilot myself, and there is the reputation, the legend of Chalk's Airways, the oldest continuously operating airline.
Chalk's has a long and rich history. The airline was founded in 1917. During the Prohibition era, passenger lists included notorious rum runners and later Hollywood movie stars. Chalk's planes even patrolled for German U-boats during World War II.
The novelty of flying at Chalk's, it was just all that history, all the people that have gone, and it was really a great place to work for that.
The Grumman Mallard flying boat that crashed was built in 1947. Chalk's Ocean Airways is the only airline that uses mallards to transport passengers.
They're not really a mainstream type of airplane, and so there's always that nostalgia about them.
Salvage crews find the plane's black box. Investigators send it to the NTSB in Washington. The box promises to reveal critical information about what the pilots were doing in the seconds leading up to the tragic mid-air disaster.
In any investigation, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder are a great desire. More data, the better. We can always learn something.
But Bill English knows he isn't going to get all the data he wants.
Okay, thanks.
The only recorder on board the Mallard was a cockpit voice recorder, or CVR.
Most airline aircraft have two flight recorders. The flight data recorder, depending on the aircraft, will record all sorts of parameters of the flight: altitude, airspeed, control positions, and so on. The Chalk's airplane was not equipped with a flight data recorder. It did have a cockpit voice recorder.
Though the lack of flight data is a big disappointment, media coverage of the crash gives investigators a very rare piece of evidence.
Authorities revealed that the final seconds of Flight 101 were captured on amateur video. The dramatic footage was shot by a tourist on South Beach.
Let's get a copy of that video. Okay, let's see it.
The video only captured the final seconds of the plane crash, but it confirms eyewitness reports that a wing ripped off in midair.
Can you enhance that for me?
The video showed the wing just after separation from the aircraft, the main part of the aircraft fuselage rolling off in the other direction, and the fire and smoke starting from that.
It was quite startling that the wing would fall off in this plane. It was a beautiful day. The water wasn't rough on the takeoff, and all of a sudden this wing just dropped off. It must have been absolutely devastating.
However, the video can't reveal why the wing came off. Answers to that question may lie at the crash site, where salvage crews are finishing their recovery of the wreckage of Flight 101. The right wing is found separate from the plane, but largely intact.
Wings falling off aircraft, modern-day situations, is a very rare, extreme event, and there's only been a few cases of them in the past 20 or 30 years.
In Washington, another type of examination is already underway. At the NTSB lab, technicians are busy analyzing the Mallard's cockpit voice recorder tape.
The cockpit voice recorder, or CVR, which does what it sounds like, records the pilots' voices talking to each other or on the microphones.
But the tape is a jumble of voices and sounds. Technicians can't retrieve any useful information.
It turned out that the erase head function, it's just like a tape recorder that most people are familiar with. It didn't erase the old stuff, so every subsequent flight kept getting recorded over and over and over again and just became a muddled sound, and it wasn't audible to us or useful.
It's another setback.
Okay, let's revisit this again because we're running out of options here.
Investigators have fewer and fewer tools to work with. Bill English considers the possibility that Flight 101 hit turbulence so violent that it tore the plane apart. But the weather on the day of the crash doesn't support that theory. There were no storms that could have caused such severe turbulence. Clearly, something else had torn this plane apart. There's a possibility the Mallard collided with something in the water before takeoff.
Seaplanes don't take off of a conventional runway. They're in water where there can be things like logs or other debris, which could potentially cause structural issues with an aircraft.
But before they can reach a conclusion on that theory, investigators consider some other intriguing evidence. It's an urgent advisory issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. It warns that due to a faulty part, the propellers on the Mallard could come off during flight.
You're kidding me.
Something such as a blade separation, losing part of the propeller, could cause a great structural load on the aircraft.
English now has a solid lead, but his team is still missing the evidence they need to prove their case.
The entire island is devastated by the loss of life as investigators searching for answers wait for more wreckage to be pulled from the sea.
In the aftermath of the crash, Chalk's Ocean Airways grounds its remaining fleet of 4 Grumman Mallards. At the NTSB's Miami command post, they're working to identify various plane fragments and other debris from the crash.
We started out with the wing itself that separated the spar, which is the main part of the structure of the wing, and any of the other fracture surfaces, looking for obvious initiation factors.
They carefully examine the propellers, looking for evidence that might confirm suspicions raised by the FAA advisory. But it's another dead end.
We're able to determine all the blades were attached, and the bending that we saw was the expected pattern from proper operation when those blades hit the water.
Once again, they're back to square one.
There's the damn color. This is what I want you to look at.
Investigators focus their attention on the fractured wing. They've noticed sooting on parts of it. It's evidence of a very rapid fire.
We want to find anything that could be the initiating factor for the wing separation. Could it have been a collision with an object? Could it have been a fire? Could it have actually been a criminal act?
The burn marks raise a sinister possibility. An explosion. A bomb. This now falls outside the NTSB's area of expertise and authority.
Let's notify the FBI.
The FBI helps us in many of our investigations, and we will utilize some of their experts to rule out terrorism or a criminal act.
If it was a bomb that brought down Flight 101, a likely target would have been one of the 18 passengers.
Thanks for coming in. We're going to need your help on this.
One name stands out on the passenger manifest. Sergio D'Angelicourt.
Welcome aboard. Can I see your boarding passes?
Certainly.
There are rumors on the internet that the crash was an assassination plot, and D'Angelicourt was the target. His family made a fortune in pre-Castro Cuba. They were so opposed to Fidel Castro's regime that they had allegedly supported clandestine attempts to overthrow his communist government.
This is your copy? All right, now there's something I want to show you. We can't tell if it's just soot or it's explosive residue.
A bomb will leave chemical traces and distinctive patterns in the torn metal. FBI technicians are specially trained to detect them. The samples from the wreckage will be tested at FBI labs in Quantico, Virginia. Four days after the accident, salvage crews are still bringing in wing fragments found at the crash site.
So we need everything that looks like it come from the right wing. Can we get some light over here? Overstress.
Most of the damage they see is from overstress fractures, areas where the metal was literally ripped apart when the wing tore off.
Come here. That's the sink.
When metal is suddenly stressed to the point of breaking, the fracture leaves a very distinctive rough edge. It's easy to distinguish it from fractures that have developed slowly over time.
Cut this from here to here and get it to Clinton, Washington.
As we started to examine the right wing, spar, and other components on scene at the Coast Guard station or the seaplane base, this was a visual examination there. We didn't have the sophisticated lab tools that we have at headquarters.
They identify parts to be shipped to the lab in Washington, where they hope closer inspection will reveal exactly what went wrong with the wing.
Hey, Clint. Clint, we're sending you as much of the wing as we have your way. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm still waiting for that report.
The results from the FBI explosives test come in.
Is that... Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
A mid-air bombing assassination could explain everything. But there is no explosive residue on the wreckage.
Okay, so that rules that out.
Structural failure is now the chief suspect in the downing of Chalk's Flight 101.
Well, that's all that's left. That's tomorrow.
It was obvious the airplane had a catastrophic structural failure. So we needed to find out the cause, the initiating factor of that structural failure.
He needs to know more about the long history of this particular Grumman Mallard.
It's very typical in any accident investigation. We want to look at the maintenance history of an aircraft. For an aircraft that's 60 years old, that's even more so important.
It takes days to comb through the 28 boxes of old records.
We want to make sure that we can develop an entire history of this aircraft, what sort of chronic problems may have shown up in the maintenance of the aircraft, and what types of work had been done on any of the factors that looked likely to be involved.
Clint Cruikshanks is a structures investigator for the NTSB.
When we go into an investigation, we try to go in with a very open mind and look at the wreckage and let it tell the story for what happened. We wanted to look at every piece that broke on the right wing to determine if this was a age-related failure or if it was something that was caused by a structural overload.
As with most aircraft, the Mallard's wings are built from aluminium alloy. The spars run the length of each wing. In between the spars are stringers that give added support. Together, these parts make up the wing box, which also doubles as a fuel tank.
And then the skin is over top of all of that structure to kind of give a smooth aerodynamic look to the wing. All of these together work to carry the flight loads that the wing is designed to carry. Once you compromise one piece of that structure, the ability to carry the normal flight loads has been compromised. Thanks.
Over the years, the wing box had been repaired many times. Chalk's mechanics had patched up areas damaged by corrosion, which is not unusual for an aging aircraft, especially a seaplane.
The fact that they land on water means that their takeoff and landing loads are different than you would have on a land-based airplane. Also, they're always in water, and the corrosive effects of water are going to happen more readily on those airplanes.
But when investigators examine the rest of the Chalk's fleet, they find that the Mallards are in far worse shape than they imagined.
Corrosion repairs. Corrosion. 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 Corrosion repairs. Lots of them.
The accident airplane and the other airplanes in Chalk's fleet were rife with maintenance issues. Corrosion was rampant on all the airplanes. There was evidence of shoddy maintenance practices on all of their other airplanes.
Many of the repairs exhibited extremely poor workmanship in quality, double, triple drilling of holes, excessive grinding of corrosion, scars on the material, and this involved the structural repairs that were made to the aircraft over the past few years.
Cruikshank's attention is drawn to a section of the lower right wing. There is a metal patch called a doubler on the surface of the wing's skin.
A doubler is simply a sheet of metal that goes over top of the skin, and it acts as a load transfer. It acts as a second piece of skin to patch the crack. It's kind of like the patch on a pair of jeans.
This is a big repair job. You sure we don't have anything on this?
It's an intriguing discovery. The patch is located exactly where the wing broke off from the rest of the plane. When he takes a closer look at this section of the wing, Cruikshanks notices the edges are smooth and shiny, totally unlike the rough edges he's been seeing on other debris.
We gotta see what's under this.
This crack is not from overstress. Instead, Cruikshanks suspects it developed over many years as the result of metal fatigue.
Metal fatigue is a process by which any piece of metal, a wing spar or anything, is repetitively loaded and unloaded. You can think of it as bending a paperclip back and forth, and everyone's done this, and after a while, it eventually breaks.
Metal fatigue in the wings is caused by the stress of flight over the lifetime of the aircraft.
In the case of this aircraft, every time it took off, the wing is loaded. That's lift that gets the airplane up into the air. Every time it lands, the wing is now unloaded, and there's no more stress on the wing structure anymore. That's just like bending that paperclip back and forth.
Cruikshanks is eager to find out what's underneath the metal patch.
Okay, let's see what this doubler's hiding.
They find even more metal fatigue. Deep cracks cut across the wing. The extent of the damage is staggering. A crack 40 centimeters long.
Man, oh man.
Investigating further, Cruikshanks makes another disturbing find.
3 machined holes in the skin forward of the leading edge. All 3 appear to be stop drill holes.
The holes indicate that Chalk's mechanics had been trying to stop the crack from spreading further. Years earlier, a mechanic had spotted the crack on the lower surface of the wing. He repaired it by drilling a hole in the path of the crack. It's called a stop drill hole.
The end of a crack, you can see even with the naked eye, is sharp. It comes to a point. That tends to want to develop a crack more. By drilling a hole at the end of the crack, that would spread out the stress, and the idea is to stop the growth of the crack there.
But the stop drill holes didn't work.
An attempt was made to repair that skin on 3 different occasions by stop drilling.
Even as mechanics put in more holes, the crack kept growing.
After the 3rd stop drill, an attempt was made to further repair the wing by attaching doublers on the interior and exterior surface of the skin.
But the doublers didn't work either. The crack on the plane's skin continued to grow. Investigators now know the right wing was damaged long before the day of the accident. What they don't understand is why the crack could not be stopped.
Proved.
But a glimmer of an answer comes when they learn the plane was sending out warning signs of a deeper, more serious problem.
the Chalk's airplane involved in the accident were showing evidence of chronic fuel leaks for a long period of time, for many years.
According to the log, fuel leaks from the right wing were repaired again and again, but they kept happening.
The crews started to notice repeated fuel leaks during standard operations, and we tried to bring it up to the attention of management just for our concerns.
Just 2 days before the crash, it happened again. While doing routine maintenance on the Mallard, a mechanic came across fuel dripping from the right wing.
They always addressed the problem with trying to reseal the fuel tanks or trying to fix whatever problem they thought they had. It always seemed to be a reoccurring issue.
The procedure for plugging a leak was to apply a chemical sealant to the inside of the empty fuel tank. The sealant would take a day to dry. Then the plane could be refueled and returned to service. The leaks should have been a clue that the crack in the wing skin was just the tip of the iceberg, that there was a much more dangerous problem with the wing's interior structure.
Fuel leaks in this particular aircraft are indicative of a problem with the wing structure. In fact, Grumman put out a service bulletin back in 1963 that warned mechanics chronic fuel leaks are an indicator of a structural issue with the aircraft.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
Cruikshanks examines the pieces that make up the right fuel tank.
Some kind of sealant.
He wonders why the fuel leaks persisted in spite of the constant efforts to repair them.
Okay. Hand me that scraper, please. Thank you.
Beneath the layers of sealant, he finds his answer.
Bingo.
Cracks in a critical support beam called a Z-stringer. It's the piece that the plane's skin was directly attached to.
All right, will you finish cleaning this off and then get some pictures, okay? Thank you.
Cruikshanks finds evidence that Chalk's mechanics had tried to repair the stringer.
It appears that they did some grinding on the Z-stringer to remove a fatigue crack. However, they never went back in and re-inspected that area.
Instead, they only applied chemical sealant to the area to make it leak-proof, and in the process concealed the damage.
Chalk's made repeated attempts to repair the airplane by stop drilling the wing skin cracks, adding doublers over top of the cracks, but they never addressed the root of the problem, which is the cracked Z-stringer. The reason they couldn't address the Z-stringer is it was covered in fuel tank sealant.
The broken Z-stringer weakened the entire wing. Now, with every takeoff and landing, the plane's skin was absorbing the forces. Over time, the skin began to crack as well. The final outcome was inevitable.
The fatigue cracking reached critical length and the wing separated from the airplane.
Investigators conclude that a hidden crack in a key component of the right wing led to the devastating crash of Flight 101.
Go all the way up and down.
Chalk's failure to identify such a serious problem now forces investigators to re-examine the airline's long history. Chalk's Ocean Airways had an image as one of the safest airlines in the world. Despite the age of their fleet, the airline had an outstanding record of safety dating back almost 90 years.
Chalk's safety record was great. They had never lost a passenger in all the years of operation.
Chalk was an old, established company, but it seems to me that somewhere along the line, the management and the quality of the work done had slipped quite a bit from in the past years.
What have you got on the financial state of this company?
Investigators are beginning to suspect that the company's reputation for safety may have been undermined in recent years by money problems.
Financial issues in an airline, especially a small carrier like this, can manifest themselves in many ways. Personnel are sometimes one of the first things to go.
A search of Chalk's financial history uncovers some trouble. In the 1980s, Chalk's went through a string of owners before going bankrupt in 1999. The airline was revived by a Miami businessman, but it kept losing money. Just a few months before the crash, the last attempt to sell the business fell through.
Not doing so well.
It wasn't a secret that we were having financial difficulty. The pilots had taken pay cuts and the captains had taken concessions, and we downsized a lot as far as personnel.
It wasn't just personnel that felt the pinch.
It was difficult for Chalk's to find spare parts and to do some of their repairs. Chalk's had a number of other unflyable aircraft that they owned that they would cannibalize for spare parts.
There were maybe only 50 or 55 aircraft ever built. In that case, the original manufacturer, Grumman, was no longer in production of that aircraft. They no longer supplied parts.
The airline's deteriorating health and the shortage of spare parts had a direct impact on safety.
There's so much regulation and there's so much just necessity to make the airplane fly. It's hard to skimp on maintenance and not impact reliability. And if you don't have reliability, then you're just spiraling downhill.
But no matter how tight the finances were, as a commercial airline, Chalk's should have been closely monitored by the Federal Aviation Administration. In fact, the FAA did assign an inspector to work closely with Chalk's.
The FAA inspector, which is called a principal maintenance inspector, was responsible for the oversight of the maintenance program as carried out by Chalk.
The inspector was aware the plane was suffering from chronic fuel leaks. And yet, inexplicably, he gave Chalk's a clean bill of health just 2 months before the crash.
What was this guy doing?
Investigators are at a loss to explain why the FAA inspector didn't pick up on warning signs the Chalk seaplane was giving off.
The fact that Chalk was an old established carrier, maybe they just accepted, well, there's only 2 or 3 planes, it's a small operation, they only fly during the nice weathers, and they're good old boys over there, they know what they're doing.
In effect, the FAA didn't step back and take a look at that forest for the trees and find out just what's going on in the maintenance program with these Chalk's aircraft.
The FAA may not have found fault with Chalk's, but it turns out that several people very close to the airline did.
But we did talk to this group of pilots who had left Chalk's prior to the accident, and every single one of them did have some story about maintenance aspects on their aircraft, whether it had to do with fuel leaks or other maintenance aspects. They all had some level of concern about the way Chalk's was taking care of these very old airplanes.
In fact, the pilots were so concerned that in the year leading up to the crash, many of them met to discuss the problem of declining maintenance.
The captains of the company decided that it would be best for us to get together as a group, discuss the issues that we had to try to get our concerns addressed. One major issue that had happened, we had an elevator cable that had snapped in flight, and the crew luckily was able to get the airplane down using power and different settings and shifting people. But in most scenarios, that would have been an accident in itself. In aviation, there's error chains that they talk about, and you have to just, if you keep compiling one link after another, it's only a matter of time before an accident will occur. And from my point of view, I thought that if they kept going down the same road that they were going down, something could happen.
Eventually, Captain Weber decided he'd seen enough close calls.
My turning point and why I decided to leave Chalks was I just had seen too many things in the recent months, too many mechanical issues that were major issues in my mind, and I had 300 failures myself that year, and I had a wife at home that was pregnant. I had lost, I guess, my confidence in the company's ability or the airplane, and I just had had enough.
The NTSB's report on the crash of Flight 101 harshly criticizes the FAA for not detecting growing maintenance and financial problems at Chalks.
Had the maintenance program or the FAA stepped back and said, these aircraft need more than just a one-time fix. They need something much deeper than this, the accident probably would not have happened.
It also uncovers a loophole in the FAA's aging aircraft regulations, which require extra inspections for older planes. But those rules didn't apply to Mallards.
The Grumman Mallard was manufactured in 1947. It only carried 17 passengers, and it was not a transport category airplane. Therefore, it was exempt from these supplemental inspections. What we have here is the FAA has made an aging airplane safety rule, and they've exempted the oldest airplanes in the fleet.
The NTSB recommends that the FAA expand its oversight of aging planes.
When we determine the probable cause of an aircraft, the point is to do this so that similar accidents won't happen again in the future. I think we've used this accident to point towards the industry and the FAA to make sure that they take a look at the overall picture of what's going on at an air carrier.
Flight 101 spelled the end of Chalks Ocean Airways. A few months after the report was released, the airline shut down.
There was a lot of history and a lot of family community involved with the passengers as well as the people in the airline. So to see the whole airline and everything else kind of go down with the airplane is additionally, emotional for everybody that ever worked there or ever loved the airplanes.